And we have, I can't see all of you because there's, oh, Clairvaux's here. I have some good friends out here. I've my friend Jana, I haven't seen for what, 15 years? She came up and we got to reacquaint, and that was terrific. She lives here in the Czech Republic. Was the health director at the time, no? Okay, for the Czech conference. So anyway, nice to see all of you. And we have, you're from Loma Linda?
She's the wife of...
Oh, you guys live back at the GC?
Yes.
But you're on the board at Loma Linda. Okay. My daughter was the first fourth-generation nursing graduate at Loma Linda. I like that. My grandmother graduated in 1912. Yeah, isn't that neat? So we got some pretty big history there, and I'm pretty happy for it. And you've got some pretty big history with your boys now. You're developing this handy-sides thing at Loma Linda. Yes, he's got yeah, he got his oldest son is on the faculty of dentistry, and his youngest son is on the faculty of public health. And his sister went to medical school at Loma Linda, so this handy-side's kind of moving through the system, I guess, huh? Well, anyway, it's nice to be here. This study of kids has been fascinating. And I think, I haven't heard Kitty speak for quite a while. Dr. Fryer, can I call you Kitty? I haven't heard Kitty speak for quite a while. She about had me in tears. She's really good.
Yeah.
She's really good. And what you just got, you'd have to pay a lot of money to buy. That's good stuff. So anyway, thank you for that, Kitty. She just about got me in tears. Man, that was so good. That was so good. So it's good to present with you again. It is. You know, you think about these kids, and we talk about in environments where kids need responsible adults to care for them. But here's the reality of it all. Some kids don't have it. Some kids don't have it. They grow up in environments where everything seems to be wrong. Is that not true? My daughter, who worked in my Loma Linda Nursing School graduate daughter, who worked in the neonatal intensive care, and I'll slow down for the translators. And if you'll remind me, I will always slow down if you'll just remind me. But my daughter worked in the neonatal intensive care unit at Loma Linda. And so they had the little babies, you know, the little 1-pounders, the little half a kilo. Right, you know, they get these little tiny babies about this big, and they live. Because the nursing department and the neonatology physicians are so good, and they care for these kids and they live. And my daughter would tell me about half of these kids, the most precious, the most beautiful, small, teeny, tiny, wrinkled, mousy-looking kids don't even have a visitor. Half of them. Half of them don't even get a visitor. Half of them, essentially, I guess, aren't wanted. Is that right, Kitty? They're not wanted. It's fascinating, and you go, why wouldn't they? And then I thought about my training. I was in medical school and got out and did a residency, and part of my job at the time was to take care of the surgical intensive care unit. And at the time, bypass surgery in the heart was just gaining popularity. It was in the late 70s. I'm that old. It was just getting going, and so we were doing 2 hearts a day, and my job was to take care of these people after surgery, and that was fine. And I recognized after some months of working in the surgical intensive care unit, about half these people don't get visitors. One of the things we know about people who are in the hospital is when they get visitors, they get well faster. How do you like that? They go, don't they? They go home sooner. Women who've had hip surgery walk sooner when they have visitors than when they don't have visitors. They walk sooner. Women with breast cancer live longer when they go to group therapy and talk to people. When they have friends, when someone's nice to them, they live longer than when people don't. High-risk kids, and Kitty knows the social support literature so much better than I do, but this idea, this biblical idea that said, did you feed them when they were hungry? Did you clothe them when they were naked? Did you visit them in jail? Hey, did you visit them in the hospital? It's good for them. And it's good for you. These kids who are growing, these little tiny kids that I can get distracted very easily, these little tiny kids don't even have visitors, and they miss out on this support. So what they do is they bring in snugglers. Does snuggling translate? This is snuggling. This is a baby. This is snuggling. Okay, so for these babies that don't have visitors, they bring snugglers in to snuggle them, don't they? Don't they? And you know what? Those kids get off ventilators sooner. They get off their meds sooner. They leave the intensive care unit sooner. They get out of the hospital sooner when they get snuggled. Isn't that cool stuff? What about these kids? And Kitty talked about high-risk kids, and she talked about environments. And what about these kids who, because relationships are so important, and these kids need to have somebody who cares. Every kid needs to have somebody who cares. And so, and really, way too many of them don't. But what do we do, what do we do for the kids who don't have that? Because some kids don't have it. They don't have any of it at all. We see these kids on television every now and then that murder somebody at age 11, age 12. We got a 6-year-old, not far from where I live, that murdered somebody recently. They got a 12-year-old kid and his 15-year-old friend who just up by me, and I live way in the country, way in the country. And he took his pack to school, 2 months ago, and one of the students noticed that a knife dropped out of it. So he told a teacher, they took the knife, there was a gun in it, and they were coming to school to murder other students. This kid was 12. So now, there's obviously some pathology here that needs treatment, and I'm not asking you to become psychotherapists. But what I am saying is, how do you prevent this stuff? How do you give it the best you've got to give so that these things are less likely to happen? I think that's my point. You're not going to fix the whole world. Some kids come with their own issues, psychodevelopmental issues, and you may be able to help make that better. Cure it? No. Cure is a whole different topic we can get into some other day maybe. But what we see with the kids who grow up in really nurturing environments is they do well. Okay? And when we see with the kids that don't grow up in nurturing environments, they don't do as well. But watch this. When we see that the kids who grow up in non-nurturing environments, who have some adult that mattered, they do well. So all of a sudden it becomes our responsibility, it becomes your responsibility and your responsibility and your responsibility to look around and say, who are these kids who are not being attended to, and how do I get involved in their life? What can I do to be of assistance to them? It's not how much money you can give to them, it's how much you can care for them. I had a lady, I'm going to speak on resilience in the plenary tomorrow. Well, let me tell you a story that I can't stand not to tell you. And I'm going to tell it again tomorrow when I talk on resilience. I was teaching a class in Kenya for Loma Linda some years ago. I've been doing this for quite a long time, haven't I? Some years ago. And I explained this concept of resilience. Does resilience translate in your languages? It doesn't translate in French, I understand. Is that right? Oh, it does. Okay. I don't speak French, but I was told that but I guess it does. It didn't used to translate in Spanish, but they eventually adapted the word in Spanish and it started to work. So resilience is overcoming the odds. Resilience is you grew up on the bad side of town, you're doing well. Your parents are alcoholics, you're doing well. It's beat the odds. That's what resilience is. So I was teaching a class for Loma Linda who had a Master of Public Health program in Kenya, and I said, is anybody resilient? And a lady raised her hand. There were 65 students in the class. Most of them were physicians and nurses. And she was a physician and was from Ohio, I think. She's from America. And I said, so what's your story? And she said, my father was an alcoholic and he was married 7 times. So where did that, the front door was always open, I guess. 7 times? How many women came through the door to get those 7? I mean, it must have been a constant show. And so I said, you should have had sex at an early age, multiple sexual partners. You should have had a sexually transmitted infection, pretty young. You should have been at high risk for drug use, multiple drug use. And you should have been at risk for failing in school. That was your risk. Because of your father's behaviors. He wasn't paying much attention to you. And I said, what do you do? She says, I'm a doctor in a mission hospital. Yeah, I said, wait, I hope this makes your hair stand up. She says, I'm a doctor in a mission hospital. I said, what's the story? She said, when I was a little girl, there was a lady. Could have been any one of you, could have been a man. And she came to me and she said, hey, people at my church are pretty nice. Can I pick you up? And the little girl said, yeah. She was only 8 or something. She was a little tiny kid. So he picked her up. She picked her up. She took her to church. And guess what? The people were pretty nice. And she always picked her up. And when she didn't, other people picked her up. And they included that girl. She went on to go to medical school at Loma. She's now working in a mission hospital in Africa. And it all happened because one lady said, can I pick you up this weekend? People there are pretty nice. I presented that at a church in the state of Washington some years ago, and the lady who invited me sent me an email, I guess, and she said, you know, a lady came to church the day you spoke, and she only comes twice a year, but she came the next Sabbath and she brought a little girl. I said, really? Are you nice? Because it doesn't matter that she brought the little girl any more than it matters that the church be really nice. It's not just about bringing the girl. It's about bringing the girl into an environment where people reflect the character of Jesus Christ. Isn't that right? She has to be happy in that environment. And if she's not treated well in that environment, she's not coming back. And guess what? You don't get a second chance. You bring them in. I remember I went to speak at a church in Washington once, and I walked in the door and nobody said hi. I thought, well, I'll go to the guest book. Then somebody will say hi. Nobody said hi. And I said, well, so I kind of walked around the lobby waiting, trying to get someone to say hi. Nobody said hi. So this has happened to you, I'm sure. So I went to Sabbath school class, sat down. I thought, well, they'll stop and say, oh, you're a guest. Who are you? Nobody did that. I mean, there wasn't anybody in that church that was going to say, hi, how you doing? And so I told them when I got up, I said, if I lived in your community, I wouldn't go to your church. Because you don't have what I'm looking for. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a caring environment. That's what our kids are looking for. Yeah, there are kids out there who don't necessarily think that they want that, but most of them, in fact, really are looking for it. So what we see amongst these really resilient kids is they're doing well in spite of the risk that they face because somebody mattered. And when you go through the world's literature on the topic, and I went through just really all of it through 1998, then I got involved in addiction in some other area. And I read really everything that was in the world's literature. And it just kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. Kids who do well have somebody who matters. Kids who do well have somebody who cares. And you can be that person who matters. And the people in your church can be that person that matters. It's not any more important that you have the right message in your church as it is that you reflect Christ's character. It is not any more important that you have the proper message. You know? People will remember. I remember I presented once for a camp meeting, and the guy who invited me had been my pastor in our church some years before. And I made the statement. I said, I can't remember a sermon he ever preached. And he didn't like that, but I didn't. I don't remember one of them. But I remember how nice he was. And I remember how much he and his wife cared for us. And that made a huge impact on my wife and me. How much they cared. One of the things we know about kids when it comes to this environmental stuff, I should say the relationship stuff, is that kids need to know that they're being supervised. And they actually kind of like it. What the research shows is that when parents know where their kids are, the kids are less likely to be involved in behaviors that are dangerous. Now, when the kids know that the parents know where they are, there's even more protection. So the parents, do you know where your kids are? Yeah. Do your kids know that you know where they are? No. Well, the kids need to know that you know where they are. And that makes it even tighter. Now you've got a situation where the kids are less likely to get in trouble simply because you know where they are. And how many kids are running around your neighborhood whose parents don't know where they are or what they're doing. And there's lots of them. There's lots of them, don't you think? Anybody got a story? You got a story? About knowing where they are, yeah. Then you get down to, pardon me? Then, I keep cutting you off. And so it's not just an issue of knowing where they are. Then you get back to the communication issue. We did research in the Caribbean on the island of St. Martin. We published it. What journal was AIDS Care? AIDS Care. And when we asked questions, we asked lots of questions, but one of them was rate your quality of relationship with your father. Scale of 1 to 7, bad to good. Like, do you get along with your father really well? And they would answer. And then, do you get along with your mother really well? And then, you ever had sex? You ever used drugs? And then we looked back and we ran I guess Katie ran the relationship. Did you do the stats on that? Ran the relationships to find out if there was a relationship between the quality of the relationship and the effectiveness of the communication. What we found out is that there's a strong relationship between your relationship with your kids and the effectiveness of the communication. You can talk to your kids about drugs, but if you're not nice to your kids, they're not going to hear so well. But if your kids love you to death and you're talking to them about drugs, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to have a strong impact upon them. Does that make sense? Now, how about your communication with other kids who come through the house? And there's literature on that. We didn't do that. I mean, as researchers, we didn't do that, but other people have. And other people still matter, even in terms of communication. Other people still matter in the lives of kids. Kids are more likely to listen to somebody who's nice, that they have a good relationship with, than somebody who's not nice, who they don't have a good relationship with. So don't you ever take drugs is not nearly as effective as you're a great kid. And you know I think you're a great kid. So let's talk about this drug thing. No, you don't need that, do you? And you can talk about the harms of it and whatever. And I don't think anybody could do that better than Dr. Handysides could do it. He's got that kind of a very, Danny, what do you think? He's got that very natural way of, and I noticed that none of his 3 kids got involved with drug use, so you must have been somewhat effective. Did you ever scream at them and tell them if they ever use drugs, you break their neck?
Those kids have a wonderful mother.
Well, they do actually have a wonderful mother, but you had something to do with that, I would think. And I would imagine your grandkids are equally protected too. And because the kids learn something, and this first and second generation goes for the good also. It just keeps on spreading. There's good stuff going on. So the environment in which you create allows your communication to be more effective. Does that make sense to you? And you want your communication to be effective. I remember once when I was at a meeting and we got off on the topic of how much in the field of health education, how important it is that people have more education, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. But the greater question becomes, is once they get that information, does it change their life? And the answer to that is it usually doesn't. In other words, the relationship between how much you know and what you do is usually fairly weak. And when it comes to health education, if you just give them a talk on diabetes and walk away, it's a talk on diabetes. But it doesn't tend to change their risk for diabetes. It doesn't tend to change their risk for drug use. So what we look at is we look at what works rather than just the information piece. Yet there's still so many people who are still out in this world passing out just the information piece. I mean, we were involved in pretty much the ground level in amongst the AIDS epidemic in adolescence, and it was phenomenal how many of the very, very strongly funded programs were AIDS education, no? It's just AIDS education. So go teach them all the things you know about AIDS, and then expect that once they get that information, the behavior is going to be changed. But what they found out is it didn't change. It didn't matter. There's actually a study amongst obese kids and non-obese kids in nutrition where the kids were asked, what do you know about nutrition? And they asked them questions. They asked them questions about eating fruits and eating vegetables and eating candy and drinking soda pop and all these different questions that any of us should be able to answer regarding proper nutrition. And they found out that the obese kids had the same high level of knowledge as the non-obese kids. So the information was there, but there wasn't a relationship with their behavior. So when you're doing the self-education thing, what we got to do is we got to go back and we got to look at how we can build relationship, or how we can do relationship building in the context of what it is that we want to do. And I suppose a lot of you come to these meetings because you want to learn how to take this stuff to the community, no? Yeah. Listen to this. Let me give you, I'll give you a tip. One of the things we've more recently got into is the value of community service. So you go out and you do a nice thing for somebody. What happens to you? Now we know when you feed somebody, they get food in their belly. That's good for them, right? But the question is, what happens to you as the server, as the person who gives the food? It's kind of an interesting question, don't you think? Because the Bible's isn't the Bible clear about how we should feed the hungry and clothe the naked in Matthew 25? Matter of fact, he said, if you're not feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, I got a fire going for you. Didn't he say that? And it's made for the devil and his angels. And that's the way you're going. Because what I really want you to do at the end of the day is I want you to feed them. I want you to clothe them. I want you to visit them. I want you to go to the hospital and visit them. Go to her hospital and visit them. Go to your hospital and visit them. Work out a method in which you can care for people who have needs. Because that's our job on this earth, is to care for the needs of other people, no? Excuse me. What we're finding out in our research is that when you, and this is research that we're doing analysis on just at the present time and writing some articles on. What we're finding out is that when you actually, the person who does the feeding, who does the taking care of other people, has benefits. When the high school kids get involved with serving other people, they get better grades in school. Now go figure that one out. Why should they get better grades in school? Because they're feeding somebody. Why should they get better grades in school? Because they're clothing somebody. But they are. They're using less drugs, less likely to get pregnant, less likely to be involved in a teen pregnancy, more likely to continue it throughout their life. And all that happens to the person who's involved in the service to other people, along with the benefits that come to the person who's being served. So how would it look for your church to get involved with something like that? What if do you have a soup kitchen in your church? I mean, does anybody have time to have a soup kitchen? That would take a lot of time. Do you have the resources to have a soup kitchen? Do you have the money to buy the food to have the soup kitchen? No. I mean, it's a question you got to face. You know, I was asking a group, I was speaking at a church in a small town in very rural Northwest, and I said, what are you doing for evangelism? And they said, we're showing Revelation seminar tapes. Does anybody come? No. What are you going to do next time? They said, show the same tapes. That's exactly what they said. I said, can you hear yourself? What you hear, I mean, you got to hear yourself. Oh, but someone's got to come eventually. Maybe they're not looking for Revelation seminar tapes. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they want to be cared for. So it was a very interesting experience. Is anybody coming? No. What are you going to do next time? Same thing. Fascinating that they would continue to do that. And I said, well, you've got a soup kitchen in your town. Do you have a soup kitchen in your town? Where the people hand out food to people?
Somebody else is doing it.
Yeah, I said, you can get involved with that. You can go down there and volunteer. You could be a part of the soup kitchen. I said, if you wanted to start serving people, you could have the Catholics serve on Monday and the Adventists serve on Tuesday and the Baptists serve on Wednesday and the Methodists serve on Thursday. You could trade off. Make it a good thing, just as long as the people get the food. And they said, okay, we could probably arrange for that. So what happens when the Catholic gets sick on Monday and they serve pork, and they ask you to step in for them. So you're going to serve pork? And I mean, the people really struggle with that, and they're sitting there going, I said, because it's going to happen. Someone's going to call you and say, could you fill in for me? I've got a dental appointment, I got a doctor's appointment. I broke my leg last night. Could you come over and drop by? And they're going to be serving something that you don't want to serve. My question for you is, are you going to go and are you going to do it?